I'm a filmmaker. It's what I go to school for. And while I was sitting with my friend up at 4 a.m. in the morning, we decided to watch 9, the animated feature directed and written by Shane Acker. And while I was browsing the internet, I don't really recall seeing anyone talk about this movie too much. So I've decided to start a new series called How to Tell a Story, a series about analyzing the story of specific movies and seeing what makes them work and what also makes them not work. For 9, while it's a visually impressive movie for, 2009, being a CGI animated film, what I really like about it is its story. So let's take a look into 9 and see what we can discover from it.
Hold on, we're entering Venom airspace. Back off, Fox.
Also, fair warning, there will be spoilers for this movie. So if you have not seen it, it's on Netflix, and it's actually pretty good. The story of 9 is actually quite simple and is told from the perspective of 9, the main protagonist, which gives us something that I haven't seen a whole lot of movies do. Sometimes movies will use dramatic irony where the audience knows what the characters don't, and where that works in some situations, the fact that the movie completely drops this concept during the entire movie except for 2 separate scenes in favor of the viewer knowing only what 9 knows, makes the movie all the more interesting. And I'd like to explain how that works well here. We find out in the movie that 9 and the other characters are really the only ones left on Earth aside from the antagonist, which will come up later. The story is certainly disturbing to a small extent, and the unease that the characters feel is based upon what they don't understand. If the audience also does not understand, the movie is basically telling them how to feel throughout the movie, because you're putting yourself in the position of the main character. You're asking questions like, what are these monsters? Where do they come from? Not knowing what they are makes them scary, and not knowing what they're capable of also invokes that same emotion. There's a couple horror movies that put this same thing to the test, where you don't know what the monster looks like until the end. And the fact that the monsters resemble stuff that we as the audience see every day, cats, birds, spiders, etc., strengthens the unease that the audience feels. But with the knowledge of the characters, the only ones aside from the 9 creations who are left alive, there's one more character that serves as the antagonist, which leads us into... There are a total of 10 sentient characters within 9. The 9 creations, or Stitchpunks as the Wikipedia article calls them, and the Machine, the main antagonist of the film. The story is a simple good versus evil story, but with the notion that it's also creation versus creator. As you find out in the movie that the 9 Stitchpunks are actually 9 parts of the scientist's soul, which is the same scientist that created the machine, or as it's called in the movie, the brain. 1 represents the arrogance of the scientist, 2 represents the engineering, 3 and 4 are the memory, 5 is the compassion of the scientist, 6 is the artistic side of the scientist, 7 is the rebelliousness, 8 is the brute strength, and 9, the protagonist, represents the humanity and curiosity of the scientist. This also represents the opposition of compassion and humanity versus intelligence. You don't find out the real origin of the Stitchpunks until 9 is forced to revisit the place where he awoke at the beginning of the movie, where he finds a message for himself from the scientist. The difference between the Stitchpunks and the brain is that they have a soul, where the brain is just created based upon the scientist's intellect. And that's the theme of the story. Even without intelligence, humanity will still persevere. That does not mean that the Stitchpunks aren't intelligent. They're crafty. But it's not until all of them work together that they can destroy the brain once and for all. The majority of the movie is spent with 9 and ends with 1, the self-appointed leader of the group. This is what makes the movie stand out, to me at least. These different ideologies clash against one another because they're only a fraction of who they are as a whole. It takes them lost to understand that if they truly want to stop the brain, they must work together and use their humanity to overcome seemingly impossible odds. Unfortunately, this isn't how the critics saw it. The movie was actually received decently, but heavily criticized for its lack of narrative. But I personally think that that's one of the strengths of this movie. Instead of focusing on side plots and love interests and rogue survivors, 9 puts seemingly realistic characters in a post-apocalyptic situation, and lets the viewer see how just a couple people survive in the wasteland. These characters don't have fantastical abilities. They're simply just average, everyday people trying to survive. The reason that they're the Stitch Punks is to show that the vulnerability of the characters is against what's basically a Terminator situation. The movie ends with the machine gone and the world slowly being brought back to life by rain coming in, and I think that this ambiguous ending is perfect for the film, because the viewer doesn't need a hearty explanation to fully enjoy the film. If you are in an apocalypse-like situation, you wouldn't want to focus on how and why you got there. Your main goal is to survive, and that's the motivation of all of the Stitch Punks. Yes, we do get some backstory, and there's more to it than just that. 2009 was when Facebook was getting really popular, and to promote the film, a Facebook profile for the scientist was created. This was a marketing campaign for the film. It shows more of the backstory and the motivations behind the creation of Brain and the Stitch Punks. You don't need this to fully enjoy the movie, but it will enhance your experience. This movie, while being a one-off film, is really just an exploration of humanity and sentience within machines. The characters in 9 beg the question of, what makes someone alive? Is it the fact that they move? Is it the actions that they take? Or is it the compassion and willingness to help others and put yourself in the way of danger to protect the ones that you care about? I hope this video maybe gives you a fresh look at the film and maybe makes you want to look back and see if you see what I did. Thanks for watching.